Welcome to episode 76 of the MMA Rundown podcast. Colby Covington and Tyron Woodley finally, after all these years of build-up, finally fought each other, and Colby Covington ended up winning and winning in pretty dominant fashion. So I'll recap that fight, and then also some of the stuff that happened right afterwards between him getting a call from President Trump on the post-fight show, and then also with having Kamaru Usman working the post-fight show, those two had a bit of an exchange as well, so I'll talk about that. We've got the rest of the card to recap, and there are a lot of fights on that card. There were 14 fights total, so I'll recap the UFC Vegas 11 card after that. Before I get into UFC 253, I just want to touch on some stuff that happened over the course of the week. So, somewhat disappointingly, I would say there wasn't as much of a build-up to this fight as I was hoping there would be, given this backstory between the two of them. There wasn't really a whole lot to talk about last week, other than just sort of recapping the build-up that had happened in the years past when Woodley had been the champion and Colby was an up-and-comer and working his way towards the title. But finally, towards the end of the week, around like Wednesday or Thursday, they actually did start to get at it. You had Tyron Woodley really getting into the Black Lives Matter side of things, and then Colby pushing back on that. So I'll just talk about the whole build up there, sort of what happened there, what my thoughts are on it. Then I will get to UFC 253, which is going to be headlined by two title fights. You got the middleweight title fight between Paulo Costa and Israel Adesanya, and then the light heavyweight title fight that is going to be for a vacant title. And that one will be between Dominic Reyes and Jan Blachowicz. And then we got the rest of the card to talk about there as well. From there, a few other stories of interest. Michael Chandler finally signed with the UFC and is going to be the backup fighter at UFC 254. So, for one, there's the interesting story of Michael Chandler joining the UFC, and then also the story of him being the backup fighter rather than Dustin Poirier or Tony Ferguson. So that's worth mentioning as well and talking about, well, why I think that's the case and how I feel about that being the case. We've also got sort of a stupid story. It really wasn't that big of a story. I think Michael Bisping did a really good job of keeping it a relatively small story, but during the Tuesday Night Contender Series show, there's a brief exchange where they were using the phrase "hits like a girl," and it just kind of like came off like there really wasn't much to it, but some people online were trying to make an issue of it. One of them is former MMA fighter Julie Kedzie, and I think that Bisping did a great job of shutting her down and kind of shutting the controversy down in the process, but I'll talk about that. And then the last thing is just a bizarre story. I'm not sure if there's been any updates on it, but Joe Schilling apparently had someone in his gym that was like using a dildo in the shower, and he decided to beat the guy up and like post about it online, and that was the story that sort of floated around through the week. So I really don't know if there's a whole lot more to it than that. I don't know how long I'll be talking about it. Not that it's the most exciting story, the most fun thing to talk about anyway, but it's just one of those weird stories that I felt like was worth mentioning, if for no other reason than just for the laughs of it. I guess it's just a bizarre story. But back to the top, we have Colby Covington versus Tyron Woodley. Covington obviously won this fight. One of the first things that I noticed in this fight was that Tyron Woodley immediately took center and was actually starting to back Colby up. And right away, I was kind of like, wow, this is interesting. We saw Colby fight against another very good wrestler in Kamaru Usman and not really try to take him down. In the past, most of the guys who he's been able to take down and beat up over time aren't guys with great wrestling backgrounds, other than maybe really Robbie Lawler. But then and not to say that Lawler is like a D1 wrestler, but Lawler is a guy who could defend takedowns against high-level wrestlers. But anyway, after that Magny fight, it's one of those things where it's like, you kind of question, like, yes, Colby had a lot of success against Robbie Lawler, but it's like, what version of Robbie Lawler was he out there fighting against? Because the version that fought Neil Magny wasn't exactly the most impressive version, like taking him down. If Magny was able to take him down the way he was, it sort of made you question, like, really, where are we overestimating Colby based on what he did against Robbie Lawler? So it's interesting that right away he's getting pushed back, and it's like, okay, well, this is interesting. If he's not going to be able to back Tyron Woodley up, or if Woodley isn't going to let him back him up, that might change his game plan and really change how this fight goes. But Covington was patient in there. Didn't throw too many shots to the point where he was leaving big openings for Woodley. Was able to time a really nice double leg underneath the right hand of Woodley that took him down. Woodley did a pretty good job of getting right back up, but I think at that moment, it was a really pivotal moment for Covington to prove that he actually can take Woodley down, to show Woodley that, and to give Woodley reason to freeze. Because one of the things with Woodley is that he likes to throw his right hand as a counter. So likes to pull back, and when you throw a left hand, he likes to pull back out of the way and then come back with a right hand of his own. So for him, when he's fighting someone who he's not worried about getting taken down by, he can look for that shot a little bit more. But if he also has to worry about getting taken down, that makes it a little bit more difficult for him. And with Usman being able to take him down early, with Gilbert Burns being able to take him down early, they were able to have a lot of success afterwards. And so for Colby to get that early takedown, I think that was really going a long way for him. And after they did get up, the fight started to look like what a lot of people expected, where Tyron's back was up against the fence and Colby was pressuring him. What I will say is that I may have to go back and watch some Colby fights to see if this is something that's completely new to this fight. Maybe it's just because Woodley's one of those guys where it's kind of like you know exactly what you're getting into, so it's easier to look for. But I thought that the way that Colby stuck to a game plan in this fight was just fantastic. For him, one of the biggest things I noticed is that, for one, the left hand was pretty much up by his chin the entire fight. And whenever he was going to throw that left hand, pretty much every single time he threw his left hand, he would also fade his head off to his right, which would be rather going. If it's to his left, then it's towards Woodley's right hand. So if his left hand is away from his face because he's throwing a punch, and then Woodley tries to counter, if you're moving to your own left, you're going to move into the punch. If you move to your own right, and even if that punch does land, you're kind of moving in the same direction that the punch is hitting you. So it's not going to be as powerful. So, for one, Covington's hand was up for most of the time, so when Woodley would look for that right hand, it would usually get blocked. Even the highlight that they showed of Woodley leaping into a right hand and having it land, it hit Colby's hand. Colby had blocked it. I mean, it's not like it doesn't hurt to have a leaping right hand like that hit your hand and then kind of have some of that force go through to hit your chin, but that wasn't going to be a knockout shot, and part of that's because of the fact that Colby had his hand up. But when Colby was throwing the left hand, he would constantly fade his head over to the side and away from Colby's right hand, so he's doing a great job of avoiding the danger on the right side. Was mixing up the shots that he was throwing before he would go in for takedowns, which is something that he does a lot in the past. But again, whenever it was coming from the left side, he was constantly moving his head out of the way. So great discipline by him there. Good job, good work up against the fence. Even when Tyron would appear to be in a good spot in a wrestling exchange, for the most part, Covington would be able to get up, whether it's from a headlock position or even when he got taken down briefly and had to go work his way back up. He'd do a good job of getting Woodley up against the fence, doing a great job with his left underhook. And then from there, would land some smaller strikes, but at least do enough to win those moments of the fight. Eventually, would work for a takedown. Wasn't able to get him after that first initial takedown. Took a little while for him to get another takedown again. But then the fourth round was able to land a takedown. Landed great ground and pound from top after doing that. And then the fifth round was able to get another takedown prior to Woodley injuring his rib. So just the discipline from Colby Covington to a game plan in this fight was very noticeable to me and very impressive that he was able to do that. If this is something that's relatively new to him, that could be one of those things where it's like the game plan was just so obvious with Woodley, where he just had to be so strict to it just because of how dangerous Woodley's right hand is. And maybe in fights after this, we're not going to see the exact same thing from Colby. But if this is something that we're going to see from him moving forward, especially now with the new camp where he's got more focus on him, that's definitely going to make things interesting to see how he looks in the upcoming fights. As for Woodley, like I said, I thought it was good on him for him to come out early and be able to take center and pressure on Covington. Again, you would have liked to have seen him be a little bit more offensive, but again, part of the reason why he was having so much trouble finding a home for that right hand is because Colby was doing such a great job defending against it. Even when he was sort of circling in that direction, he constantly had his hand up and was always ready to kind of step off to the side and avoid it. So the openings really weren't there for his right hand. So then at that point, for Tyron, it's one of those things where it's like if you don't have a big... If you're not offering a lot of danger from your lead hand, whether that's with hooks, whether that's with jabs, whether you're kicking with your lead leg and sort of keeping guys in front of you that way, it makes it difficult if someone's going to block off an entire side and you don't have other answers, and that seems like that's something that a lot of other fighters have done against him, and he really hasn't developed enough weapons from his left side to counter against that, so that was an issue there. But also, I would have liked to have seen him try to wrestle a little bit more. Now, he knows how the grappling exchanges felt, like I mentioned. There would be times when it looked like he was in a good spot, and then Colby would be able to come back up, get the left underhook, and get him up against the fence, so maybe that's why Woodley didn't want to wrestle him more. But Colby Covington, for as good as his pace is, for as good as his offensive takedowns are, it's not like he's a guy who can't be taken down. It's not like his takedown defense is unstoppable. Obviously, he got taken down by Rafael Dos Anjos a couple times. So you would figure that a guy like Woodley might look to throw in some takedown attempts of his own as well and see if that's another path he could take to find some success here. But ultimately, it was him mostly reacting to his opponent as he has done in past fights, and Colby was very disciplined in making sure that he wasn't giving too many openings to Woodley. It seems like the biggest openings that Woodley found were openings for guillotine chokes, but again, he didn't want to jump guillotine without feeling like he had it completely locked in, which makes sense. And so when he was trying to hold the guillotines up against the fence, Covington was able to make some adjustments and get out of trouble with them. As far as the actual finish goes, in the fifth round, Colby sort of has a guillotine threatened on him, but does a good job when he gets the takedown of passing over to the opposite side. So his head was on the left side of Woodley, so he got his body over to the right side of Woodley and was in a half-guard position. From there up against the fence, there really wasn't much leverage at all for Tyron Woodley to get a lot of power in it, and since he didn't have a lot of leverage, especially with his legs, he was really trying to overdo it with his arms and get as much of a squeeze as he could. I think for him, especially given how the fourth round went, he's like, look, if Colby gets out of this guillotine, there's a decent chance that I'm going to be on bottom and just taking shots for the next 3 minutes, and that's how the fight's going to go. So I'm going to give everything I've got to finish this guillotine, but given that he had very minimal leverage, especially with the lower half of his body, He really went for it on trying to squeeze and twist with the upper half of his body and ended up injuring his rib. As far as whether or not I think that it was a legitimate injury, I would definitely say so. I've guillotines haven't been as much of a problem for me, but there have been times in the past where, like, if I'm alone with a bigger guy and I'm trying to, like, butterfly sweep him and I don't have the most leverage, I might try to, like, muscle it too much and hurt my ribs doing that. So that actually is a type of position where you can hurt your ribs. I've hurt myself in positions like that before. I heard Dominic Cruz on the announce team also say that he has hurt himself in similar positions. So, given that position, I'm not discounting at all that Woodley could have hurt himself there. You kind of wonder what the extent of the injury was and how bad it hurt. If you're pulling really, or if you're really like trying to explode into a movement, sometimes you really can do some serious damage. Other times it might be more of just like a strain and something that takes about a week and then it goes away. So it's not really clear how bad this injury was for Woodley, but even still, it's something that hurts a lot at the moment. For Woodley, just kind of like screamed out in pain in the middle of a fight, in the middle of a 5-round fight, in the middle of a main event. You would think that that's the type of thing where you can kind of like just bite your teeth or bite your tongue and just let go and try to fight through it. But it's one of those things where like you're not expecting your rib to sort of pop when it does, and then it kind of catches you off guard, and that's what happened to Woodley. So we'll see eventually what the actual damage was, but I don't, in any way possible, I don't think that he was faking this here or that he was just looking for a way out. I know some people are saying that. For Colby to say that, I get that. That's kind of part of his shtick. It seems like, depending on who's talking to him and what specific question they're asking him, who they're saying something very respectful of Woodley, like when he was talking to Trump, or if he's trying to downplay him and sort of like push the beef, then he'll be dismissive of him. But I think most people understand that what happened there was a legitimate injury. Woodley was in legitimate pain, screamed out, and obviously if you scream out, that's a verbal tap. I think the official call on this is that it's a TKO. I don't see how you can call it a TKO. It was definitely a verbal submission. If you can get a win by submission due to strikes, I don't see how this would not be a submission as well. A submission due to strikes is basically a TKO where the fighter decides to call it before the ref does. So if you have a moment like this where the fighter is verbally tapping out, I don't see how it's not called a submission, but it's not as though that matters either way. It's not as though like the UFC has like one spot for submission of the night and one spot for knockout of the night, and Colby was in contention for either of them. Their performances of the night, but even still, it's not like Colby was going to win either of those anyway. Mackenzie Dern definitely had the best submission of the night. And then for knockout, there were plenty of great knockouts. There was a good knockout on the undercard with Costa. There was also a great knockout by Khamzat Chimaev as well. But either way, great fight for Colby Covington. As far as what's next for him, it seems like Masvidal is probably going to be the fight. There's some talk of Masvidal versus Diaz. I think if that fight actually makes some movement, Masvidal is probably going to take that fight, whether it's Nick or Nate, but probably Nate. But in the meantime, we have a title fight in December. I don't know if it's going to be in Colby's best interest to wait till that title fight happens, then assume that he's going to get the next title fight after that. Leon Edwards is another possibility. I don't know that Colby's looking to take that fight, though, so we'll see where they go from there. But there are definitely some interesting fights ahead for Colby Covington. For Tyron Woodley, it's tough because he is dangerous out there. He is still a very good wrestler. He does still have a lot of power with that right hand. It's just that a lot of fighters know how to deal with that, and they develop good game plans for it. Now, granted, the three guys who just beat Tyron Woodley, two of them are very high-level wrestlers with Kamaru Usman and Colby Covington. The third one, Gilbert Burns, is a high-level Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt world champion who has very good takedowns and has good takedowns for MMA as well. So all three of these guys are guys who can really offer a threat with the takedown, and that really makes things a lot more difficult for Tyron Woodley. If he fights a guy like Leon Edwards, for example, if that fight actually ends up getting made, is Leon Edwards going to really offer a legitimate takedown threat to Tyron Woodley? And if not, how does that change the fight? Because for most of the time that Tyron Woodley was a champion, he beat Robbie Lawler. It's not like he ever had to fight Johnny Hendricks or another like elite wrestler. I'm trying to think who he fought as a champion. We had Damian Maia, so I guess Maia did offer a takedown threat, but never actually took him down. So for the most part, that made things easier. Plus, Maia gassed himself pretty quickly on all the failed takedown attempts. We had the Wonder Boy fights. Neither of those two were really going to offer a takedown threat unless they actually knocked him down with a punch. Darren Till, again, same type of thing. So if he fights a guy who's not really going to offer that takedown threat, I think Woodley's going to be a lot more live in the matchup than what we've seen in the past three fights. The question is, who's that opponent going to be? It's not going to be RDA right now, even though that seems like a fight that could have made sense because RDA has a fight with Islam Makhachev coming up. Leon Edwards, again, I don't know if the UFC wants to do that to Tyron, where they're putting him up against Leon, because if Leon wins, that means it's 4 straight losses for Tyron. So for Tyron, maybe they're looking to give him a more winnable fight. But I do think that's a fight that you possibly could do, especially if Leon versus Colby isn't a fight that happens. But outside of that, maybe he wants to take some time and sort of reevaluate things, maybe put a little bit more work in the gym. But at this point in his career, I think he's like 38 years old. It's not like I see him putting in a ton of work to really develop a bigger threat from the left side, whether that's with his lead hand or whether it's with lead kicks or a combination of the two. So it seems like at this point, he's still a very dangerous fighter. He still has dangerous power. Not the easiest guy to take down. Most guys aren't going to be able to get one takedown on him. He just fought 3 guys who were good enough to get at least one takedown on him. But a lot of other guys aren't going to be able to do that. And then it'll be interesting to see how those matchups work out. So for the UFC, we'll see what they want to do with him next. But I think he's got more to give. It's just that he's had some pretty tough matchups in the last few fights, especially given his style. I guess one more thing to mention with this before I move on to the rest of the card is that there was a very cool moment in the post-fight show where Colby Covington was giving an interview to Megan O'Leary, and one of his cornermen off to the side hands over a phone. You can kind of read on the phone. It's funny that it says POTUS. I don't know if that's if that's a thing where sometimes the caller ID will just tell you like where a call is coming from, and it'll say that. Like for example, if I get a call from like a business or something, like if I get a call from a doctor, even if I don't have them as a contact in my phone, sometimes it might say like the official name of the office. So that could have been the case, or it could have just been that he has that person saved as a contact, and rather than having it saved as like Donald or having it saved as Donald Trump, it's just saved as POTUS. But either way, it said POTUS on the screen, which I thought was funny. But then he started to have a conversation with Trump. You could then hear it over the microphone, and you could hear the entire conversation. It's just a pretty fun conversation, but I thought it was really cool for Colby to get that call from the active president of the U.S., and that's not something that I see a lot in sports, whether that's a Trump thing or whether that's been before Trump even. It's not like Barack Obama wasn't interested in sports. He obviously enjoyed sports quite a bit and had some relationships with some of the players, but it's not like we ever saw a moment where after the NBA Finals, while a player is being interviewed, that someone hands him a phone and Barack Obama's on the other side of the phone. Even with Trump, it's not like we've seen that before where someone's in the middle of an interview and then there's a call from Trump. So to see the active sitting president of the U.S. calling a fighter mid-interview and to hear the conversation between the two is really cool. So I thought that was a pretty fun moment and definitely an enjoyable one for Colby Covington and one that he'll remember. And I know a lot of people don't like Trump, so for them, they might just think it's really cheesy, but whether you like Trump or not, you have to admit it's a pretty cool moment right there. So next thing to talk about is the rest of the card. So the co-main event was between Donald Cerrone and Nico Price. This fight ends up being a split draw, which I think for the most part was right. I think that Price won the first 2 rounds. Cerrone just edged out the 3rd round, but there was 3 different eye pokes from Price. Price had a point taken away. So 2 rounds to Price, 1 round to Cerrone. Cut a point off. Now you're 1-1. You got a draw. That's where we're at with that. For the most part, Nico Price is having more success with arm strike, so punches, elbows. While on the other hand, Donald Cerrone was having a lot more success with the kicks. But oftentimes, if that's how we're going to describe a fight, usually the guy who's landing the punches is going to be, usually the guy who's doing better with the punches is going to have more success just because punches are quicker and easier to land. And that was kind of the case here. So Price was able to land a lot. Really came after Cerrone at the start. Cerrone is known to be a slow starter, and that really showed in this fight as well. He had to fight off a pretty big barrage from Nico Price for Price to jump ahead pretty quickly in that first round. But Cerrone was able to do it. Had some offense of his own, but ends up losing that first round pretty clearly. Second round a little bit closer, but again, Price had some moments there where he was just landing shot after shot after shot. So he was able to take the round, especially after like a mid to late round flurry. And then the 3rd round, there was that 3rd eye poke where the point gets taken away. And then from there, Cerrone was able to land a little bit more, landed a nice head kick up against the fence. So this fight goes to a decision, ends up being a draw. From here, Cerrone says that he doesn't want to fight again for the rest of the year. This is his 5th straight fight without a win. Again, had it not been for the eye pokes, he probably takes the L here. And by probably, I mean he actually does, because that one point obviously was the difference between him winning and losing. For Nico Price, he's a fun fighter. Not exactly a guy who I see being top 10 at any point in his career, or top 5 at any point in his career. Not as though it seems like that's what his goals are either. He seems like a guy who enjoys putting on exciting fights and getting those of the night bonuses. And I think a lot of fans are perfectly fine with that. So for Price, I don't think he's going to wait for Cerrone to come back for his next fight. I think Price will take another fight in the meantime once he heals up. And then for Cerrone, given that he probably doesn't want to fight for the rest of the year, I don't really know how the lightweight or welterweight divisions are going to look at that point to determine what the best options are going to be for him. Maybe he's going to be the guy who Nick Diaz comes back against, but we don't even know that Nick Diaz is coming back, and we don't know what kind of money Nick Diaz is going to be asking for, whether or not that's going to be a reasonable thing at all. Fight before that, man, great performance from Khamzat Chimaev. there wasn't really a whole lot that happened in this fight. I did a breakdown of the fight, which again was like a 17-second fight, so pretty much everything that you need to see, you can actually just watch that breakdown. The breakdown itself goes a little bit over 4 minutes just because I was showing some replays and then adding a little bit on top of that. But effectively what happened in this fight is Gerald Mearshart gave a pretty good interview before the fight. A lot of people remember the parts where he was talking about how, like, this is America versus Russia, and how he's a black belt, and how he's going to make sure that Chimaev loses this fight, and if he doesn't lose the fight, he's going to take so much damage that he's not going to be able to move on to Maia, and how he felt like it was disrespectful that people were looking past him. That's the part of the interview a lot of people remember. The part that a lot of people didn't talk about, though, was when he actually broke down what he had seen from Chimaev in the past. And one of the things that he mentioned is that what Chimaev likes to do is he likes to throw a single strike. Oftentimes it'll be a kick. Sometimes it'll be a punch. He'll throw that high, and then as you're sort of getting ready for the next strike, then he'll shoot underneath, get a takedown, and then from there he was describing what he likes to do on the mat in terms of his wrist rides. But the first part of that, in terms of how Chimaev likes to set up his takedowns, it's strike first and then come underneath the takedown afterwards. And so it looked like from the start of this fight, Mearshart didn't really want to put too much pressure on Chimaev because he expected Chimaev was going to throw a quick shot and then duck underneath and get a quick takedown. I think Mearshart wanted to start this fight off a little bit slower and sort of feel out Chimaev and get a better idea of what was coming. So that's why he was backing off early on. Chimaev did land one kick where Mearshart just backed away very quickly after the kick to make sure that Chimaev couldn't take a shot afterwards. So then at that point, given that Mearshart really wasn't throwing first and wasn't trying to give Chimaev too many openings for a takedown, Chimaev just starts to walk him down. You have Mearshart in the southpaw stance circling off to his left, which is towards Chimaev's right. What a lot of people are saying is that Mearshart circled into the fight-ending strike. That's not really what happened. Generally, if you're saying that somebody circled into a strike, you're kind of implying that they're in the motion of circling into the strike as the strike lands. So it'd be like if I'm in the southpaw stance and I'm going to my left, and then there's a punch that's being thrown in front of me from an orthodox fighter, from their right to their left, but to me from my left towards the right or towards where my head's going. The idea is that if I circle into the strike, that my motion is coming into it as it is coming into me, and then we kind of like collide in the middle. That's not really what happened on this particular strike. Mearshart did have his feet set when the strike was thrown, and when it landed, it just kind of hit him straight on. It was not as though it like hit him from the side as he was circling into it. But what happened, and what was really impressive to me about this strike, is that Chimaev opened up on that right hand, making it look like he was about to throw an overhand or a hook, and Mearshart read that and put his hand up to the side of his face, getting ready to block it. So if the punch that appeared to be happening or appeared to be coming actually came where it was like a hook or an overhand, something that generally hits from the outside rather than straight on, Mearshart's going to block it. But after starting to open out wide, Chimaev then, instead of like going around in a loop, went wide and then straight down the center from there. And the opening that was created by Mearshart trying to block wide is what created the opening for the punch to land up the middle. And that punch landed and was able to knock him out. So some people were saying that it was just a super fast shot. There was definitely speed on that punch. It was a nice punch. But it's more the deception in that he made it look like he was throwing a hook and then came down the middle, sort of in the middle of his motion, that led to that opening and led to him getting the knockout. And it was really impressive. So for Chimaev, got to give him credit for that. Looked fantastic. Effectively up a weight class. This guy should be fighting at welterweight if he's fighting at the weight class. That probably makes the most sense for him. But instead moves up to middleweight against a guy in Mearshart who's a pretty tough guy. About a 500 in the UFC, which is not bad. UFC is a very difficult level to get to, and once you're there to hold a 500 record there, it's impressive. So for Mearshart to just get run over like that by Chimaev, you definitely have to give Chimaev a lot of credit. There's a lot of talk after this where they're saying, "Oh my goodness, like Damian Maia definitely shouldn't take this fight anymore." Now it's just cruel to make Damian Maia fight Chimaev. I wouldn't go that far. Nothing in this fight really tells me anything about what a Damian Maia fight's going to look like. Largely because Damian Maia would fight in the exact opposite way that Mearshart fought. While Mearshart was fighting worried about a takedown and constantly on his back foot, Damian Maia pretty much with everyone, regardless of how heavy their hands are, is generally walking forward, pumping out the jab, and then trying to shoot underneath and get a takedown. So I don't see Maia being concerned about being taken down by Chimaev. I would expect to see Maia pushing forward, so you're not really going to get a setup or a moment for a punch to get set up quite like this in a Damian Maia fight. So yes, it's impressive what we saw from Chimaev. It was a very nice punch. It was very nice how he disguised the punch. But it's not as though this really tells me anything about what to expect from a Maia fight. I'm still interested in seeing the Maia matchup. I'm interested to see if Maia can shoot under and actually get some good entries on takedowns. I'm going to be interested to see if he does get good entries, if he's able to take Chimaev down. If he's able to control Chimaev, if he takes him down. If he doesn't take Chimaev down, is he going to pull to half guard like he does with a lot of other opponents? If he does, is he going to be able to come up on a sweep? Is Chimaev going to stuff the sweep and then start having success from top like he does with most of his other opponents? There's a lot of interesting stuff to see there, and I think that fight should be a lot more competitive than this fight. Granted, that's not saying much because this fight wasn't competitive at all. Mearshot didn't land a single strike. But just Maia's style of fighting isn't going to create the same openings that we saw in this fight. Not to say that Chimaev can't find openings against a guy like Maia, but the fact that he was able to find this opening against Mearshot doesn't tell me anything about what to expect from a Damian Maia fight, so I'm still interested in seeing that. Fight before that, we had Johnny Walker versus Ryan Spann. Absolutely wild fight. Walker was getting rocked, as it seems as though we've... Apparently that was like a thing for him in Jungle Fight too. Part of the reason why his record wasn't exactly spotless when he got into the UFC. But was able to survive. Eventually looked like he was about to be finished again. First time was off of a left hook. Got dropped. Spann came on top of him. Wasn't able to do much from there. Walker was able to get back up. But then had Walker stumbling again. Was trying to take him up and down up against the fence. And at that point, Walker was doing those old Travis Brown style elbows and was able to knock Spann out up against the fence. So for Walker, put on a very exciting fight. Got a win by finish. But with that being said, definitely saw some weaknesses there, and it's not as though Walker's a guy who we look at as a guy who could potentially be a future title challenger again. I think it's kind of funny that you have like Walker and Chimaev going back to back, and that it's easy to remember from like a year ago when Johnny Walker was new to the UFC. All we'd seen in the UFC was impressive wins by him. He gets like a 17-second knockout against... It might have actually been 17 seconds, but he had the Ledette knockout, and he also had the Serkinov knockout. I think the Ledette one was the quicker one. But it's like you see a knockout like that, and you're like, oh my goodness, like this guy... You got to put him up there against one of the top guys. Like, man, he must be like a fight or two away from John Jones. And then as you see more of him, you sort of realize, okay, well, actually, there's some bigger holes there. Not to say that Chimaev and Walker are very similar in that way. I think Chimaev's a much better fighter than Johnny Walker is from a technique standpoint. But I just think it's kind of funny that you have the two together where it's like, we all kind of remember overhyping Johnny Walker after a really fast knockout, and then like one fight later, everyone's talking about how Khamzat Chimaev should be fighting someone much tougher than Damian Maia and should be fighting someone in the top 5. And it's kind of like, maybe Chimaev is going to be ready for that, but it's just kind of funny how quickly we forget the same lessons over and over again. The fight before that was Randa Marcos versus Mackenzie Dern. I was pretty surprised by how this fight ended up going. I actually put a little bit of money down on Randa Marcos, with the assumption being that Marcos is a pretty good wrestler. Dern doesn't have great wrestling, so for the most part I figured that Marcos would keep this fight on the feet, and if it did go down, she'd be able to work her way back up relatively quickly. Instead, you sort of got the same old wild striking out of Mackenzie Dern. She ends up flopping to her butt on a pretty embarrassing kick attempt, but rather than letting her up, Marcos decided to follow her to the mat, which wasn't the best idea. Ends up getting caught in what I would call shoulder guard, but shoulder guard is just a way to describe like the triangle position where you have one arm in, one arm out, and your legs over top of the shoulder. Marcos did a good job of keeping her posture high. It seemed like there were a couple of moments where she could have gotten out of that position entirely, but got a little bit too patient for her own good there. But eventually was able to get out of it once Mackenzie Dern went for a sweep. Sort of like an off-angle armbar, possibly could have looked to turn into an omoplata, but either way, ends up on bottom. Dern gets to mount briefly, then Marcos goes back to half guard. Darren then starts to pass to quarter mount, which is like basically half. It's basically when you're in half guard, but instead of them having like control over top of your knee, they're just basically hanging onto your ankle. So you're basically in mount. Once you get your ankle free, you're pretty much going to slide into mount from there. But Darren ends up throwing a leg over. It looks sort of like she was looking possibly for like a monoplata or barada plata, which is like a shoulder lock that you really don't see much in MMA. But then from there, just went for the straight armbar from there. Even though her leg was still trapped inside, or her ankle was still trapped between the legs of Randa Marcos, she was still able to get a lot of leverage on the arm. Did a really good job of switching between a bunch of different grips. Always maintained control of the elbow. There was a brief moment where it looked like Marcos was almost able to get her elbow out, but then Darren was able to suck it right back in. But she was looking to hit from a bunch of different angles. What I really like about what Mackenzie Dern was doing too is that she was really... It's not just the traditional finish where you kind of like hold it up against your chest and then pop your hips in. She was also like putting it underneath both of her armpits and then trying to like pop her hips in after she had control into the armpit, which can get really tight if you place it right. It's kind of like what we saw in the Kat Zingano versus Ronda Rousey fight, where Rousey was able to tuck the wrist underneath the armbar or underneath the armpit and then extend into it. So we saw that from Mackenzie Dern as well, and eventually she was able to get it, I believe, on her left side, and then pop her hips in and be able to get the finish. So great performance by Mackenzie Dern. Big win over Randa Marcos, who's someone that's hung around the top 15 of the division before. Darren is number 15 right now, so it's a good one for her. It'll be interesting to see what the UFC wants to do with her right now. I know back when she fought Rebus, I think there was some kind of expectation that if she gets the win here, that you can really start pushing her towards the top of the division. Right now she's 9-1. Her only loss is that Rebus fight. So does the UFC want to actually treat her like a title contender and start putting her up against some of the top girls and start having her fight some other ranked girls, or does she stay around number 15 and keep fighting girls who are sort of like in that 16 to 20 or 16 to 25 range? We'll see where they go from there. But Darren definitely needs some more work on her striking for sure. Her wrestling, it would be very helpful to her if she can get it to be a lot better. I don't really see her as a title contender, but it is nice of her to get these wins and get these early submissions as well. Because one of the things that sort of plagued her early in her career is that even when she would be able to get other girls to the ground, and girls who were not as good as Randa Marcos, she would have trouble finishing them pretty quickly. So you'd have fights where she'd have to like take a girl down a couple different times to get the fight down to the mat a couple different times before she finally gets it finished in a later round. So for her to be able to get these quick finishes, whether it's with Hannah Cyphers or with Randa Marcos, is definitely a good thing for her. And then the last fight of the main card was Kevin Holland versus Darren Stewart. This fight ends up being a split decision. I didn't think it should have been split. I think Holland definitely won it 2-1. Third round, you could argue, or at least if I'm thinking of the right fight, I think the third round in this one was the one that was probably in Stewart's favor. But either way, Holland did a really good job on the feet with landing strikes from a distance. It seems like maybe it's just because of who he's fighting right away, because I know he had that first fight with Thiago Santos. I wasn't that impressed with Kevin Holland's striking. It's just one of the things where it's like he's a long fighter and he throws some nice shots here and there, but it wasn't the most impressive thing to me. But he had a decent grappling, but I figured he was one of those guys who wasn't really going to have a great record in the UFC. He'd probably be out of it pretty quickly, but he's still a pretty fun personality. But his striking really has gotten good over time. I've been pretty impressed from what I've seen from him lately. And up there against a guy in Darren Stewart who's very dangerous, who has a lot of power. Did a great job of picking his shots, landed some heavy shots on the ground, got some takedowns, got on top, was able to do good work from there as well. Also had his moments where he was taking some heavy shots from Darren Stewart and he was on his back, but for the most part, really good performance by Kevin Holland, and he gets the win here. For Darren Stewart, he moves to 12-6. I would hope that the UFC keeps him around. He's always a fun fighter to watch. Has some good wins here and there. Had a nice win over Darren Wynn recently as well. So it'd be nice if the UFC keeps him around. He's always a fun fighter to watch, but you kind of get worried, given the struggles that he's had recently, whether or not he'll be around anymore. But for Kevin Holland, another one for him is good. I don't know how close he is to the top 15, but it seems like if he keeps getting wins like this and he keeps taking fights on short notice, the UFC is going to be happy to offer him some matchups that he's looking that he'd be more excited to take, I should say. For the prelims, final fight on the prelims was Jordan Espinosa versus David Dvorak. Dvorak had a lot of success with his leg kicks. Espinosa was having trouble really getting in close and being able to initiate any kind of wrestling exchanges. So Dvorak was able to win this fight on the feet, wins a 3-0 unanimous decision. Fight between Damon Jackson and Mirsad Bektic. Bektic had some success early on in getting the fight to the mat and controlling from top. There were some moments where he was getting in trouble, including one with a Kimura when he was on top of side control, but had a flexible enough shoulder not to get finished with it and was able to survive that. But then in the third round, goes for another takedown. Jackson catches the guillotine choke. Didn't exactly look like the tightest choke, but Jackson used it to sweep. And again, this is one of those things where it's like maybe... I don't know. I guess like for me personally, like I like to use the guillotine choke a lot, so it's one of the things I focus on more details of. But there's another fight like this. I think it was the Sean Brady fight as well, where it's one of those things where if someone's going for a guillotine choke on you and you're on top, and you're rolling over to sort of get the pressure, it's almost like a must that amidst that roll you have to make sure that you can control the legs in the middle of the roll, whether you catch them in a half guard or able to get like a butterfly hook and sort of extend them away. You got to do something with your legs to be able to keep them from securing mount position when they roll you over. And it seemed like Bektic was just focusing on the hands the entire time, was focusing on the choke the entire time, and as a result, Jackson's able to come up on top in the mount position, and then from there, he was pretty much just stuck. I'm not sure how tight the choke itself was, but you can definitely just see like the blade of Jackson's wrist just getting jammed right into the Adam's apple of Mirsad Bektic as he's arching his back and putting all of his weight into it. So it's just one of those positions where it's like, whether it's like a choke tap as in he's trying not to go to sleep, or whether it's a pain tap as in he's getting his Adam's apple just like shoved into the back of his throat. It's just a really awful position to be in, a really painful position too, and Bektic is forced to tap and Jackson gets the win. And then I don't know what his particular issue was with Bektic, but he was screaming in his face right afterwards, which I didn't think was the coolest thing. really wasn't all that cool when TJ Dillashaw did that with Cody Garbrandt, and everyone knew what the beef was there, but it doesn't seem like there was really enough of a beef between these two for that to really be warranted. The fight before that was a bizarre one between Mayra Bueno Silva and Mara Romero Borella. Fight goes to the mat. Silva's on her back, starts attacking from that similar triangle armbar position. It just didn't seem like Borella really even cared that much. Like, I don't know what her deal was at all, but she didn't really look like she was trying that much. Eventually gets caught in an armbar. It didn't look like it was the tightest. It didn't look like she was fighting her hardest to get out of it. But either way, Silva was able to go triangle armbar and get the finish with the armbar. Just watching the video, there's like something I saw on Twitter where someone's like, is there anything unusual with the betting lines here? Just based off of how Borella fought. It's one of those things where it's like, it would be a lot to say that this fight was fixed. It would be a lot to say that Borella took a dive. But it was just... It was a bizarre performance from Borella. I'll just say that much. Hopefully there wasn't anything fishy going on here, but that was a very weird finish. Then the fight between Jessica Rose Clark and Sarah Alpar. Jessica did a great job of keeping Alpar from taking her down. Was pretty strong in the clinch. Looked really good from there. Was able to land a lot of shots. Third round, a bit of a weird moment where it seems like Alpar is almost going to get finished. Isn't dropped by a shot, like a particular shot. It's more, I don't know what exactly she was doing, if she was just kind of like dropped to the pressure or what it was. But starts to drop as Clark is throwing a knee to the body. But since she drops it, ends up hitting her right in the head. And based on the timing, it was very close whether or not that knee landed just as her butt landed or just before her butt landed. On the replays that they showed in slow motion, it looked like it was just before, but in real time, it's going to be pretty much impossible for the ref to tell either way. So the ref calls a stop right there, thinking he sees an illegal knee. Apparently they go to replay in the meantime and they find that the knee was legal. So you would figure, and again, I've just mentioned this last week, there was that situation with Chris Weidman, and again, this was New York, not Las Vegas, but there was a situation with Chris Weidman against Gegard Mousasi where it appears as though Weidman takes an illegal knee. He decides to take his time, sort of to recoup. They go to replay, they find the knee was legal, and then they say, well, it looks like he's taking his time, looks like he's pretty hurt. That means it's a TKO. And so Weidman never had a chance to go back in there. And in that case, it was called a foul. In this case, again, it's called a foul initially. They go to replay, find that it wasn't illegal, but apparently a different commission. They decide, okay, well, the fight can continue. So even though the fight should have been stopped right there because it was a legal knee and it was definitely a fight-ending knee, they decided to continue. 2 more minutes of a beating where Jessica Rose Clark just beats the crap out of Alpar before she's able to finish her again. This time the finish actually counts, and Jessica Rose Clark is able to get the finish rather than it going to a decision, which is good. Then we had a fight between Derek Minner and TJ Laramie. Very quick fight. Laramie gets Minner up against the fence, tries to take him down, gets caught in guillotine. Is not able to escape the guillotine and has to tap out. Pretty quick fight again. This one between Randy Costa and Journey Newsom. Costa used a really nice setup from Southpaw that I like as well. I think it's one of those setups. I know for a fact that Robert Whitaker likes to do it as well. I'm not exactly sure who should be credited as like the main innovator of it, or the person who like has the most success with it. But I know Whitaker likes it a lot. But it's where you throw it straight and then follow up with a kick on the exact same side as the punch. So oftentimes people are expecting if you're going to throw a shot from the right side, then you throw left. So it's right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left. But the setup is one where you throw a cross, and then in this case, since he was fighting out Southpaw, it's left cross and then left high kick following the cross. And he wasn't really throwing the cross to land the cross. It was more so just kind of create a distraction. So he throws the cross, throws the kick as a follow-up, lands it flush, and is able to get a finish on Journey Newsom. There's a split decision between Andre Ewell and Erwin Rivera. Ewell definitely won that fight. Again, not sure why I went to split decision. And then the first fight on the card was a KO/TKO from Tyson Nam, getting one over Jerome Rivera in the second round. Great ground and pound, and then had a little clip where he's doing the Jordan shrug afterwards. So pretty good for him there. So to finish up the talk on this particular card, I'll just talk about some of the stuff that happened in the promotion for this fight. So again, like I mentioned, there wasn't a lot of promotion for this fight up until like the final couple of days before it happened. I wish there would have been more promotion for it. Now, it does kind of suck that this was on ESPN Plus. It's on a subscription service. It's not like this is something that people can watch on ESPN, or better yet, on pay-per-view. But either way, there's a big story to tell, and it really wasn't sold up until the final moments when they actually had the press conferences. So from Tyron Woodley's side, he decided that for the press conference he was going to be decked out in effectively Black Lives Matter gear. So he had like a shirt that said Black Lives Matter. He had a hat that was kind of like a MAGA parody, where instead of it saying "Make America Great Again," it said "Make Racists Catch the Fade" or something like that. "Make Racists Catch the Fade Again." I think catch the fade probably would refer to getting beat up or getting hit or something. That would make sense in context, but that's not exactly a term I've used before or know all too well. But either way, that was his gimmick, and whenever anyone would ask him a question, he would pretty much give him a brief answer and then make sure that he include the phrase Black Lives Matter in there. As far as what my take on this, it's difficult because here's the thing. You could... I'll say this first. I don't agree with Tyron Woodley or his political philosophies, but I'm not the kind of person where it's like if I don't agree with you, I can't say that you're smart or that you're educated or you know things. You can be smart and have different opinions than me. I can be an idiot and have different opinions. Like, it's not like any of this matters. You can have smart people on both sides of it. I will say that I think that Tyron Woodley is a smart person, and that's what makes this difficult for me in terms of trying to figure out whether or not to rip into what he was doing or not, because there are a lot of professional athletes who have done a similar thing where they just really dig deep into this whole BLM movement and really have like these very shallow opinions where they pretty much repeat stuff that can fit on to like a 140 character tweet and just say Black Lives Matter or basically just repeat hashtags over and over. And that's kind of the feel I was getting out of Tyron Woodley in this press conference. So it's one of those things where it's like if Tyron Woodley felt like he was doing the exact same thing that a lot of these NFL players are doing, a lot of the NBA players are doing, where he's just kind of repeating slogans and thinking that he's actually like making the world a better place, then I think that's definitely worthy of criticism, because I don't think that he's going to accomplish what he's trying to accomplish. All he seems like he's doing is just trying to get applauded by people and to get his press conference shared online and having people like, oh, wow, that's great, Tyron's fighting for us, woohoo, great job, retweet, like. If that's what Tyron was going for, then it's kind of like, all right, well, great job, like you're just as educated as all these other guys who were forced to take gen eds in college for 1 year before they can go to the NBA. So great job there. That's one angle to look at it. That's if you're not going to give Tyron Woodley any credit and assume that he was just trying to like jump on the bandwagon, which is definitely possible. Another angle to look at it, though, is this may be the best move that Tyron Woodley, whether or not the numbers reflect it, just beforehand, before a fight, this might have been like the best promotional thing he could have done for a fight. In that Colby Covington, we know going in, especially for the fact that he was at a Trump rally and Trump was calling him up there and like giving him a bunch of credit and posting videos with him. Given the time we're in the country right now, if you think back to professional wrestling, you always kind of want to have these guys who are foils of each other, whether it's the good guy, bad guy, or whether you get into more characters like that. You know that Colby's going to play the Trump character. You know that Colby's going to play the Republican/MAGA character going in. So if you can be the foil to that and be the exact opposite and play like the liberal character, play the Black Lives Matter character, and you kind of have like these two opposing viewpoints, it makes the fight a lot more interesting. And doing what Tyron did, Tyron just completely just completely played into the whole BLM character. So whether he was just kind of trying to do like a professional wrestling thing and really establish himself as like the opposite character of Colby Covington and really get a lot of interest in the fight that way, if that's what he was doing, or if that was a thought of his leading into this, then I have to give Tyron credit for that, because that was actually a great move from a marketing standpoint to build this fight up, to really make it be known that he is the antithesis of Colby Covington. That if you like Colby Covington, then you're going to want to watch Tyron Woodley lose, and if you don't like Colby Covington, then Tyron Woodley's your guy. You're going to want to see Tyron win, and then you can kind of like post in like a guy who wears Black Lives Matter headband before a fight ends up knocking out MAGA guy or something like that. Like, depending on what side of the aisle you're on, you have the guy to root for and you have the guy to root against, and you feel like the guy that you're rooting for is sort of on your same team. So in that way, what Tyron did, I think, was very effective in a good way for the UFC. But again, it's hard for me to say whether or not I think he did that on purpose, whether he knew that was the case and decided to feed into it, or whether he was sort of in the same headspace as a lot of these other professional athletes and more of the team sports. So it's hard for me to take a hard take on it either way, because it's one of those things where it's like, if after the fact Tyron's like, oh yeah, I knew what I was doing there, I was just trying to build the fight, then it's like, you know what, Tyron, like I applaud you, great move. But if Tyron was just like, yeah, no, I just feel like I was going to make the world a better place by constantly repeating the phrase Black Lives Matter, because that's definitely going to solve a lot of stuff, and it's like, all right, Tyron, well, you're definitely not accomplishing shit, so thanks for trying. So it's one of those things where it's like, since I don't know what his actual motivations and thoughts were beforehand, it's hard for me to really take a strong take on it. Now, with that being said, Colby obviously had a response to Tyron Woodley being on the BLM side, and one of the things that he mentioned that drew a lot of attention was that he was saying that Tyron Woodley, by supporting Black Lives Matter, was effectively a terrorist sympathizer, or sympathizing with a terrorist organization. I'll go to this first. I think if you if you're on the right, you're probably very familiar with the thought of Black Lives Matter being a terrorist organization, and you don't really find what Colby Covington said there to be all that upsetting. I'll say this, just in terms of what the definition of terrorism is. It says the unlawful use of force and violence against persons or property to intimidate or coerce a government, the civilian population, or any segment thereof in the furtherance of political or social objectives. So then the idea would be is that a lot of these rallies, especially the riots, are in the name of Black Lives Matter. You definitely have situations of force and violence being used without question. There's definitely an attempt to intimidate. Whether it's, well, I guess you could say the government's definitely being intimidated. Given a lot of the buildings that are being attacked, a lot of these are federal buildings. You also have a lot of these people going after police departments and other local government as well. Also the civilian population, we see the videos of people who are just like eating that are getting yelled at and told to like put their fist up to support Black Lives Matter. It says, or any segment thereof, in furtherance with political or social objectives. They definitely have political and social objectives that they're trying to push. So by that definition, a lot of people on the right do feel that it's reasonable to call Black Lives Matter a terrorist organization. Now, you can argue whether or not that's the case. You can argue whether or not these Black Lives Matter rallies, whether or not the rally itself being held by Black Lives Matter has one set of objectives, and then the people who decide to join in, whether or not their objectives that they're trying to push are in line with the overall objectives of the group that is in charge of the whole protest. There are arguments to be made there, but with that being said, it's not an uncommon thought on the right, and I know there's like a popular meme with Steven Crowder where it's like, blah, 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 I changed my mind. He actually did a video of Black Lives Matter as a domestic terrorist organization, changed my mind, put that up on YouTube. So if you want to get more of a nuanced understanding of why the right, or why a lot of people on the right would say that BLM is a terrorist organization, that's where you can go and learn more about it. I figured I'd just at least give like a brief overview of it. But that's where Colby's coming from with that. So the idea being that if you support the Black Lives Matter group, and if Black Lives Matter meets the definition, kind of like what I just mentioned before, therefore, that would mean that you are sympathizing with a terrorist group. So that was what Colby Covington was saying. Then there was like a post that Tito Ortiz put up pretty much saying the same thing, but rather than calling Woodley a terrorist sympathizer himself, he was just calling Woodley himself a terrorist. I don't know that trying to get into deep philosophical conversations about the things that Tito Ortiz says is the most worthy thing of anyone's time, but if you're going to say that Tyron Woodley himself is a terrorist, I don't even know that fits the definition, but if he does support the Black Lives Matter group, then it can be arguable depending on your perspective whether or not they meet the definition or not. But there was a lot of people upset about the whole idea of BLM being tied to terrorism. But again, I'll just say, if you want to understand why people are saying that, briefly it was what I mentioned, but in deeper analysis, you can go to the Steven Crowder video where he like did a bunch of research before talking to some random people on the street. But you can at least hear the argument out of his mouth and decide whether or not you think that there's any reason behind what he's saying at all, or whether it's just completely misguided. But that's where that was coming from. And then the last thing to talk about on the pre-fight thing, which isn't BLM related, but there was sort of this talk before the fight, and it really didn't end up leading to anything. There was a moment, I guess, in the fourth round where Colby did switch stances, threw a right hand and then ducked underneath left leg lead, which would be orthodox stance to shoot for a takedown. But there was talk of his coach saying before the fight that he realized that Colby Covington is actually right-handed, and that it taught him a lot, and it's going to create some new openings for Colby. This drew a lot of attention online. A lot of people were saying, "Oh my goodness, like Orthodox Colby is like this new thing that's going to come, and it's going to be crazy. Like we don't know what to expect now. Is Colby going to come out right-handed this entire fight? What's it going to mean?" I think this was one of the most overplayed stories that I've ever heard in a while. I don't know that I would completely say anyone who bought into this is someone who's obviously never trained before, because I guess it depends on if you have trained striking before or if you've trained MMA before. It depends on what you do personally and what your training partners do, because maybe it isn't all that common to you. Here's the thing, though. For stances, there are generally three different things that are going to go into consideration in terms of an MMA stance. There's going to be, what is your dominant hand, which in this case, Colby's dominant hand is the right hand. For most people, I think the dominant hand tends to be the right hand. Then there's going to be, what's your dominant leg in terms of kicking. And then the third one, which also is a big factor, especially if you're a grappler, is that when you grapple, what leg do you usually lead with when you grapple? So in a lot of cases, if someone's an orthodox fighter, it actually happens that they will grapple left leg lead, which right leg back, so orthodox. Their strong leg will be the right leg, and their strong hand will be the right hand. So all three things actually align into the orthodox stance. But there are a lot of people where they're sort of like an in-between, where they have two things on one side and one thing on the other side, and sometimes, depending on whatever they find to be most important, they might end up fighting in an opposite stance relative to their hand. So it seems like with Colby Covington that's the case. I know with Luke Rockhold that's also the case, where Luke Rockhold is right-handed and fights southpaw. Luke Rockhold, I think, is actually left leg dominant as well, so he likes to throw that left kick from the rear side rather than from the front side. I'm not entirely sure whether in grappling matches, I'd have to go back and watch the Nicky Rod match again, whether he's right leg lead or left leg lead. I think he is right leg lead, though, so in that case, he grapples from southpaw. He has a stronger left kick, so even though he is right-handed, he fights southpaw because the other two things tend to be more important to him, and given how he fights. I know for myself personally, I'm right-handed, but my left leg is my power leg, and I like to grapple right leg lead or left leg back. So for me, though I am right-handed, I will also fight out of southpaw just because I have the other two things in my favor, and I like to grapple. So when I heard this news about Colby Covington, it's kind of like, okay, cool. Colby probably also likes to grapple right leg lead, which makes sense. I don't know whether or not his kick is more dominant from the left side or the right side. He throws a lot more kicks from the left side. That could be because it's the rear leg. It could also be that he might be left leg dominant. I'm not entirely sure on that. But that's effectively what the case has been for Colby for his entire career. But when the coach said this, I think a lot of people were under the assumption that Colby had no idea that he had more power on his right side than his left side, and that his coach was like, "Wow, you're hitting these pads really hard. You know what? Come to a bar with me tonight. We're gonna try something out." Then Colby goes to the bar, meets up with his coach. They go to a punch machine, and then Colby then he's like, "Okay, Colby, hit this with your left hand, see what kind of score you get." All right, that's cool. All right, now Colby, I want you to stand orthodox. Now throw your right hand, see what you get. And then Colby's like, "Oh my God, I'm right-handed." I think that's what a lot of people thought this story meant. That's not what the story meant. Colby is known that he's right-handed. This wasn't news to Colby. It's just one of those things where it's his coach was like, "Wow, this is interesting. I didn't realize that Colby is right-handed. So maybe there's more things that we can do with the right hand and try to add that in future fights." But this idea that it was this new discovery that Colby just found out that he's right-handed, and his coach just found out that he's right-handed, and they were going to make some major adjustments off of that. That was never believable from the start. It wouldn't have made any sense anyway. And in this fight, we really didn't see a whole lot of him fighting out of orthodox, other than that brief moment prior to the takedown in the fourth round, where he almost kind of got caught in a guillotine, taking that shot as well. Was having some trouble with the 10-figure guillotine before he was able to get out of it, and then eventually get the high crotch takedown. So I thought that was another story that was worth mentioning. I wish I could have said a little bit more before the fight, just so I could have been on the record of saying, no, he's not going to fight orthodox this entire fight. It was pretty clear that wasn't going to be the case, but we got the fight. Colby kept fighting from southpaw. Just more of the same from that. Did a great job of following the game plan. And outside of that brief moment where he was orthodox, it's just what we're used to seeing from Colby. On to UFC 253. Great two fights that end the card. The rest of the card has got some decent fights on there, but for the most part, I would almost argue that depth-wise, the card I just recapped is a deeper card than this, but at the top, much more top-heavy. So in the main event, we got Israel Adesanya versus Paulo Costa. This is going to be a pretty tough fight to call. I like that Costa is very aggressive, even against fighters who offer a lot of power, like Yoel Romero. Costa didn't really have too much trouble about coming forward constantly on him and continuing to attack even after he got dropped and took some heavy shots. So it'll be interesting to see if he gets discouraged from coming after Adesanya the entire time. If not, how's Adesanya going to deal with it? I think that Costa does a great job of attacking the body. Adesanya is very good about trunk movement and moving his head a lot, but mixing in the body a lot as well is probably going to create some openings for Costa. So I don't think that Adesanya is going to run right through him like some people seem to think. They seem to think that Adesanya is just going to be the slicker striker and just kind of pick him apart. Over time and as the fight moves on, it may get to that point, but I think right away Costa's going to bring a storm, and Adesanya is going to have to get some reads really quick. And if he doesn't make some reads really quick, there's definitely a decent chance he gets caught. With that being said, Adesanya, one of his best punches is his straight right hand, especially off of counters. If you go back and watch the fight that he had with Kelvin Gastelum, especially late in the fifth round, he was just constantly catching that right hand over and over and over again. Was finding openings for the right hand at times against Robert Whittaker as well. And I think that's really going to be a shot he's going to be looking for here, is being able to slip out of the way of Costa's shots and then throw the right hand over the top. Now, with that being said, generally when he's slipping a straighter punch. Costa throws a lot of looping punches, so generally with looping punches, if you're slipping out of the way and you're not blocking them or going underneath, so usually if you're going underneath and doing like a bob and weave, it's not as easy to land a straight shot unless you go bob and weave underneath, and then as you come back up, then you kind of dart right in with a straight shot. So it's not to say that Adesanya can't do that, but that's a little bit different than what I've seen from him in the past. So it'll be interesting to see if he does find a home for that right hand a lot, what kind of setups he's going to be using. Also how he's going to use his kicks. I'd imagine a lot of front kicks are going to be used here to keep the distance, but This is going to be a very interesting fight. Adesanya has a lot of success in throwing a lot of feints and getting people to freeze up. If Costa just comes in with reckless abandon, as he has in the past, and doesn't really give a shit whether or not Adesanya is going to feint, it'll be interesting to see how successful he is with that, and if he is successful, especially early on, if that changes how Adesanya fights. Because if Adesanya isn't having the success with his feints that he typically has, it definitely changes the game a lot for him. So there are a lot of questions going into this fight in terms of how it's going to look and who I think is going to win. But given that I expect this fight to be on the feet for the most part, Costa might be able to take it down. Costa could offer some decent ground and pound from top. I think Adesanya's got very good takedown defense. He does have decent submissions to threaten with. As far as the details on them, it seems like he's missing a few details here and there to be more dangerous with them. But even still, he can throw on the attempt and definitely create some danger. He's been working at him over time. I'm sure he's gotten better since we've last seen him. So if it does go to the ground, I don't know that I see Costa running right through him there. But I think for the most part, this fight should stay on the feet. Technically speaking, Adesanya's got the advantage there. Costa does have a lot of power. So it's a tough one. I'm definitely not putting money on this one, but I can't wait to watch it. Co-main event, Dominic Reyes versus Jan Blachowicz. This is going to be for the light heavyweight title. I just think that Reyes, between his length and between his footwork and how quick he is relative to Blachowicz, I think he's going to have a lot of success in this fight early. If this goes into later rounds, it's tough because Blachowicz should have the advantage on the ground. With that being said, I don't know that I see him having the best takedowns and being able to close the distance on Reyes. And if he gets him up against the fence, it's going to be tough to take him down up against the fence. If he tries to shoot in the middle of the octagon, that's going to be a dangerous game to play, especially if you end up getting sprawled on and stuck in the middle of the cage. So I think for the most part, while this is on the feet, Blachowicz does have power. This is light heavyweight. If either of these guys hit each other with their best shots, they're going to probably be able to win by knockout. But I would imagine that Reyes is going to have the advantage here. If this fight goes to a decision, I think it's more likely that Reyes wins. And generally, when you're picking a fight, the first question you want to ask yourself is, if this fight goes to a decision, who do I think would have won it? And I think in this case, it would be Reyes. Fight before that is Kai Kara-France versus Brandon Royval. I think this is Royval's second fight in the UFC after the win over Tim Elliott. So he's already ranked at flyweight, given how small that division is right now. And by small, I don't mean like 125. I mean just number of fighters in the division. But Kai Kara-France, very good striker. From a grappling standpoint, he's solid enough where he's able to stay out of trouble for the most part. I know Royval is probably going to want to take this fight to the mat and offer up some submission threats there, but I think that for the most part, Kai Kara-France is going to be able to keep his distance here and pick him apart and be able to get the win. Then we've got Kellen Vera versus Mary Renault. Renault sort of on the final legs of her career. I would imagine that Vera is probably going to get the win here. And then a pretty fun fight between prospects and Hakeem Dawodu and Zuba Tukagov. They'll be headlining the main card. On the prelims, we got Brad Riddell returning. He is the striking coach at City Kickboxing. He'll be fighting Alex De Silva. Don't know a ton about him, but he's got 21-2 record, so this should be pretty fun. We got Diego Sanchez returning against Jake Matthews. Kind of figured that Diego Sanchez would be fighting Damian Maia, given the interest between the two of them to take that fight, but instead they got him lined up against Jake Matthews. Obviously, Damian Maia is likely to be matched up with Khamzat Chimaev. But Matthews is pretty tough, pretty solid on the feet, good black belt on the ground. Sanchez, in the fights that he's had success with recently, he's been able to use his grappling more, being able to take guys down and control from top. Don't know that I see him dominating this fight on top. If he does get Matthews down, he can probably do enough to win the rounds from there, but it's not like I see him being very dominant there. But on the feet, I would definitely have to give the edge to Jake Matthews, so this should be a fun one to see. We got Shane Young versus Lodovit Klein. Don't know anything about him. We got William Knight versus Alexa Kamer, and Juan Espino versus Jeff Hughes. I believe this fight's going to be at heavyweight. So that's it for the UFC 253 card. Next story to talk about is relative to UFC 254. So initially the plan was going to be that you have the main event between Khabib and Justin Gaethje, and in the co-main event you would have a great matchup there at lightweight, but the idea would be that if something happens to either Khabib or Gaethje, that one of those guys steps up and takes the fight in the main event. That was supposed to be Tony Ferguson and Dustin Poirier. Apparently Dustin Poirier was asking for more money. I don't know how much more money he was asking for, what the specifics of his request were, so it's hard for me to say whether or not he was being unreasonable or whether the UFC was being unreasonable and not being willing to pay him whatever he was asking for. But either way, with Poirier backing out, Tony Ferguson was sort of in this limbo spot where it's like, okay, well, are they going to give Ferguson someone else to fight? Ferguson publicly comes out and says, I want the fight with Poirier. Pay the man. Let's not be ridiculous here. And apparently during that process, Ferguson just decided he wasn't going to take the fight unless it was against Poirier. And since Poirier and the UFC had come to a standstill, it took Ferguson off the card.
So then at that point, they're like, okay, well, we still want to have a top-ranked lightweight on the card who's going to be available in case something happens to Gaethje or Khabib. And it just so happens, given the timing, that Michael Chandler's contract with Bellator was up. He had a lot of interest in going over to the UFC. They got into talks, came to an agreement, and so Michael Chandler was signed by the UFC. And as it so happens, there's an opening now where they're looking for an elite lightweight, and it seems like pretty much everyone else was taken. And so it made sense where it's like, okay, well, you know what, Michael Chandler, your first time in the UFC is just going to be to make weight for UFC 254. And if anything happens to either of those two, then you're in a title fight, whether it's going to be an interim title fight with Justin Gaethje, the current interim champion, or whether it's going to be an actual title fight with Khabib Nurmagomedov, the actual champion. And this is one of the things that I mentioned in the past, even before Justin Gaethje came up, where if you're looking at matchups for Khabib, the types of matchups that are most interesting are other guys who are going to be incredibly difficult to take down and hold down, but also offer a lot of danger on the feet, or guys who offer the threat to take Khabib down and beat Khabib at his own game. And a guy like Michael Chandler is one of those guys where he's a Division I All-American, very difficult to take down, very difficult to hold down as well, and on the feet has a lot of power. So it's one of those things where it's like Michael Chandler might not be the type of guy who's going to beat all 10 of the top 10 UFC guys, but he is a guy who offers a very interesting style matchup for Khabib specifically. And so if it happens that Justin Gaethje has to back out of this fight for whatever reason and we get Michael Chandler in there against him, that would be very interesting in that I would definitely argue that Justin Gaethje is a better striker than Michael Chandler is. But if we do get the Michael Chandler versus Gaethje or versus Khabib fight, boy, would that be a fun fight, because it's going to be difficult for Khabib to take Chandler down. It's going to be difficult for Khabib to hold him down, you would figure. And so at that point, if they end up fighting on the feet for the most part, as long as Chandler isn't like his old teammate, Tyron Woodley, and just waiting for the perfect time to throw a right hand and ends up just getting frozen to death effectively, you could get a very interesting matchup there where Chandler's really offering some trouble for Khabib. Now, whether or not Chandler would try to take Khabib down and control him, maybe he's able to. I don't know that that'd be in his game plan. I think for the most part, Chandler's going to try to avoid grappling exchanges in general if he's fighting Khabib. But even still, that's a style matchup that I think a lot of people would love to see. Even if people aren't completely sold on the idea of Chandler fighting for a title against Khabib Nurmagomedov, I think that specific style matchup, title or no title, is one that a lot of people want to see. And a lot of people, especially if Khabib's going to be done in the next couple of fights, a lot of people want to see Khabib fight the guy who at least in the expectation of most fans is going to have difficulty taking down and holding down. They want to see him fight that guy who's going to be difficult to take down and is going to offer some danger on the feet. Gaethje fits that mold. Chandler fits that mold as well. And then the other one they want to see is the guy who might try to out-Khabib, which is that GSP matchup where GSP would like to take him down, control from the top, pass his guard, and eventually submit him or win by ground and pound. So if anything happens to Gaethje, it seems like we're still going to get that first matchup where it's against the guy who's got power on the feet and who's going to be difficult to take down and hold down. So I'm definitely happy about that. I would much rather Tony Ferguson be the backup fighter here, because I really want to see Tony Ferguson versus Khabib Nurmagomedov. But if Ferguson decided to plant his heels in and say, look, I'm only going to fight on this card if Dustin Poirier is fighting, and the UFC had moved on from Poirier, and we don't know what Poirier's demands were, so we don't know whether or not the UFC was being unreasonable or whether Poirier was, then I can't be too upset about the fact that Michael Chandler is taking this backup role right here. And if this goes as planned, then it's not like this is going to be something that people remember anyway, because does anyone remember the fact that Alex Volkanovski was the backup back when Frankie Edgar fought Max Holloway? Chances are probably not, because Frankie Edgar and Max Holloway both made it to that fight, and that fight ended up happening. So hopefully this is one of the things that we don't really have to think about too much in the future. Maybe Tony Ferguson versus Michael Chandler is a fight that gets made. Maybe Michael Chandler versus Charles Oliveira is a fight that gets made. Maybe something like that happens. And then the division has a chance to work itself out. And then hopefully Khabib decides to stick around a little bit more than just 2 fights. But if we do get an injury and if Michael Chandler gets to step in, I would definitely be interested in seeing it. And I'd love to see how he does. Next topic is something that's just kind of stupid, and I'm not even sure I'm going to spend 60 seconds talking about it. But on the Tuesday Night Contender Series, there was like a brief moment where Laura Sanka mentioned the phrase "fight like a girl," and then Michael Bisping was making a joke about that as well. And some people were upset about the fact that Michael Bisping was talking about that, and Julie Kedzie was among the people who were trying to give him shit online. Now, Bisping did a great job in responding to that, where he's just like, go find someone else to bitch about. Like, this is absolutely nothing. I was talking to Laura Sanko. Don't be a man hater. Like, you're just being obnoxious. And I think for the most part, people were happy with that response from Bisping, and it pretty much just killed the controversy right there. But with that being said, this is one of those things where it's like I don't understand why people try to make a controversy out of it anyway. I think for the most part, when people hear the phrase "talk like a girl" or not talk like a girl, punch like a girl, throw like a girl, you understand what's being said there for the most part. What that phrase means is you're generally just throwing with an arm. You're generally just using your arm. So like throw like a girl, for example. If you think about her, most girls who don't have a great background in sports where you have to throw balls, if you're just like at a park with a girl and she's like throwing a tennis ball over at you, she's generally not gonna be like turning her shoulders, like turning her hips to do it. Like it's generally just gonna be like an arm throw where you're just using your arm. Effectively, that's what throw like a girl means. You're just kind of like using your arm. You're not really using all the available muscle groups that should be used for that throw. Same type of thing with punch like a girl, where it's more like an arm punch than a punch where you're like properly using technique with your hips, with your feet, with your shoulders. So that's effectively what the phrase means. I think for the most part, people understand that. You don't have to like make this into like some big like sexist controversy whenever anyone uses that phrase. There was some effort to do that with Michael Bisping. Bisping did a good job in responding to that and shutting it down right away. And it seems like there really isn't any controversy beyond that. So whether or not you think that Bisping is a great announcer or not, whether you want him to continue announcing for the UFC, that's not the type of thing that you like to see be the reason why he stops announcing for the UFC. If Bisping's not going to announce for the UFC anymore, let it be because he's not doing a good job in the opinion of enough people, or in the opinion of the right people, I guess. You don't want like a Mike Milbury situation where, and this is a hockey story, but there's an announcer, Mike Milbury, who was on NBC Sports. He was not very well liked by a lot of fans. With that being said, they still kept him around. A lot of people, I guess, they didn't turn off the TVs enough. Maybe they got annoyed when he talked, but they still wanted to hear what he had to say. But he made a mention of this idea that because the NHL players were in a bubble, that there weren't all the women around, and that sort of took a distraction away, which isn't really that controversial of a thing to say. I mean, if it's a WNBA, if you were to say that the female players were less distracted because their husbands weren't around, like, that's really not all that controversial. So for him to say that the women's basketball, or that the men's hockey players weren't too distracted because their wives and girlfriends weren't around, it just wasn't that big of a deal. But NBC made a big deal out of it, and all of a sudden he got fired as a result. So the hope would be that Michael Bisping doesn't get canned over something stupid like that, kind of like what happened to Mike Milbury a few months ago, and it looks like that's not going to be the case. It looks like Bisping will still be around, so that's good. And then the last thing to talk about is that really stupid Joe Schilling story. So this is something that he posted on Instagram. I don't know if this story is even real. It's so bizarre. It doesn't make a lot of sense. Apparently, from his side of the story, though, is that he was at a gym, and afterwards, apparently, someone was in the shower for a while. So he like decides, okay, what the hell's going on here? So he decides to bust into the shower while this guy's in there. I don't know if it's like a shower stall or what the deal was, but apparently, when he busts in, it's like some homeless guy who's fucking himself in the butt with a dildo. And apparently, first off, that's just I don't even it's not like, here's the thing, like, unless I owned a gym, I don't know that I'd see any reason to like bust into someone's shower stall for taking too long. I'd probably be like, hey, get out of there, like give it another 5 minutes and then we gotta get you out of here or something like that. For whatever reason, he decides to bust in. That's a weird move. Then he gets in there and the guy's doing that, which is also pretty weird on top of that. But then he decides that a proper response is that he's going to beat him up for doing that. I don't understand why that's like the most reasonable response there. Like, it's a bizarre situation. But that being said, like, it's not like he was like fucking another person in there. It's not like he was like doing anything with a kid. Like, it was a dildo. He was just, apparently that's what he's into. But for whatever reason, Schilling thought that it was worthwhile to beat him up. Then film him like chasing him in the street and beating him up some more. So if this is like actually a real story, if what Schilling was saying was true, it seems like he could be in some legitimate trouble with the law. Cause it's not like there was any self-defense going on here. It's not like he had any reason where he should have been beating that guy up. He filmed it too, which doesn't make it any better for him. So if that guy wants to press charges and the story is actually real, then there's a decent chance that Joe Schilling could get himself in some serious trouble. And between the controversy around it, because if the idea is that he just beat the guy up because he was like masturbating with a dildo, like if he was just like if he was in there with a flashlight, would he not have beaten his ass up? Like, is it because he was doing like some gay shit? Like, is that why he did it? It's just like, if this is a real story, and I haven't heard much since, so it tends to lead me to believe that it isn't. But if it is a real story, it seems like Joe Schilling could be in a lot of trouble, and it could lead to his career being done as a fighter, but then also him as a coach. If he's the guy who beat up a gay guy in a shower for doing something on his own time, would a lot of places like the UFC or Bellator want to have him like showing up in the corner of their fighters? That could end up being a question if this is real. Like, it just seems like such a bizarre situation And I hope it's made up. I hope it's just one of those things where they were just trying to like draw some attention, and they thought that that'd be a weird enough story that would get attention, and here I am talking about it. But if this is real, it seems like Joe Schilling could find himself in some serious trouble in the near future, and it could be to the point where a guy in Joe Schilling, who a lot of people who watch the Joe Rogan podcast are familiar with him because he's been on the podcast a lot. But on top of that, he's in a lot of corners in the UFC and also in Bellator, and if he finds himself in some severe legal trouble, that could affect the corner of some big fighters. I know Mickey Gall is not the biggest fighter, but I know that he was working with Joe Schilling. But there are also some other guys who've been working with him on and off as well. So we'll see if this story develops into anything more than that, or if this is just something where they were just trying to like create like a viral video or something, and that's why he had a camera ready to like show a video of like a dildo on the ground in a trash bag, and then some guy like screaming like no, stop it please, while he's beating him up. Like it was bizarre. So I hope it was just like an attempt at him creating a viral video and that's all it was. It's just a weird way to do it if that's what he was doing. If not, it'll be interesting to see if the story moves on from here, and if Schilling finds himself in some hot water and potentially unable to corner any other UFC fighters and unable to fight again in the near future. So we'll have to see where that goes. But that covers it for this week. I actually am recording this right now a couple hours after the Covington versus Woodley fight. So it's possible that as Sunday comes along, we're going to find some new stories that are of interest that'll be worth talking about. But even still, we have a full fight week ahead of that, and then obviously we've got 2 title fights that are going to be happening next week. So we'll have we'll have at least one new champion. I'm not sure what to expect with the middleweight fight. So we'll have that to talk about, and then we'll have the fights coming up the week after that to talk about that are going to be happening in Fight Island. I'm sure we'll have more details on Chimaev, whether or not that fight with Damian Maia is going to be signed, given how much he wants to fight and given how he took basically no damage in this fight, unless maybe he hurt his hand a little bit, which I doubt. But if we're just trying to take guesses here, maybe Chimaev gets booked for another fight before the Damian Maia fight, so we'll see if that happens as well. But I'm sure some other stuff will come up. Hopefully we find out what the hell happened with that Joe Schilling thing, where it's either like, okay, well, he was just trying to make a viral video and that's all it was, or maybe we find that there's some charges pressed and learn more about that. But I'm sure there'll be some stuff to talk about. Hopefully there's nothing else that comes out of left field like the Joe Schilling thing did this time. But again, it seems like with MMA, it's almost never, unless there are no fights coming up, that we're not going to have anything interesting to talk about. So I wouldn't imagine that it's going to be the case next week.